Ladies and gentlemen, if you would be kind enough to stand up for the Italian national anthem. Thank you. Please be seated. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, friends, it is a great honor and pleasure to welcome you at this high-level meeting to deal with a topic not only of contemporary interest, but a topic which is literally unfolding in front of us as days go on. A gradual transformation in values, principles, policies, and practices which affect the international community as a whole. If you will forgive me, because I have so many dear friends in the audience, I would like to beg your indulgence in at least extending particularly personal greetings to a number of those here, starting with His Royal Highness Prince Hassan and Princess Sarwat, for having taken the time to join us here. I don't know if it was my good fortune or the Pope's good fortune, but Prince Hassan and Princess Sarwat had an audience with the Pope today. So I'm not sure if the Pope took advantage of the fact that Prince Hassan and Princess Sarwat were coming to the Siracusa Institute and decided to have the special audience, or the other way around. But since my good friend and former president, Father Dennis Holschneider, is here with us, I suppose he will want to give credit to the Pope for that as opposed to me. But this is a very significant place, as you can see. This is a church that was built in 1705. The church and the convent were starting to build in 1680, and it was concluded in 1705. And what is of particular significance is that this church was built in the Jewish quarter of Siracusa. So here we are in the Jewish quarter of Siracusa, and for those of you who are interested, if you walk on the side of the building, you will see a sign called Via della Giudecca. So for those of you who believe that there is some divine scheme in things, here you have a Catholic church built in a Jewish quarter, which is administered by a Muslim. So I think there might still be hope for humankind to be able to join together in doing things which are worthwhile for all of humanity. I'm particularly honored and pleased to have with us President Danilo Turk, who has just ended his presidency as President of the Republic of Slovenia. And I don't know if I can extend a personal wish, President Turk, and that is hopefully in a few years to see you as Secretary General of the United Nations. So if that ever happens, you can say you heard it first in Syracuse. We are particularly delighted to have with us His Excellency Minister Khalid, Minister of Justice of Bahrain, with whom I've had not only the pleasure of working when I and Sir Nigel Rodley were members of the Bahrain Independent Commission of Inquiry, and Judge Walid Akoum also, and Judge Khalid Mohi. So we have a few people who are leftovers of the commission, and Professor Khalid Sirri, who've worked in this rather unique experiment, which had never happened before, and that is for a country's government to establish an international commission of inquiry internally with total and complete freedom to investigate, to report, and to disseminate the findings of its report. I think that took a great deal of courage and foresight on the part of King Hamad, who deserves a great deal of credit. And a large number of the recommendations have been carried out, and this progress has been made. Obviously, many people always say, is the glass half full or half empty? There's always progress that needs to be made, and so long as there's the goodwill of proceeding, that is the most important thing. I'm also delighted to welcome Dr. Ali bin Fatis al-Marri, who is the Attorney General of Qatar. This institute has a working relationship with the center he has established in Qatar on fighting corruption, which is very important for the Arab world. So we're delighted to have you here, Mr. Attorney General, as well. There are so many here who are dear friends and who will subsequently be introduced in order of the various presentations that they have. But if I can just sort of pick at random, you'll find a rather distinguished looking lawyer sitting in the back. He doesn't wear a tie, however. I don't know why. His name is Bruce Palmer. Now, Bruce Palmer, who looks, can I say you look almost older than I do, was a former student of mine at DePaul University Law School, but he has since then accomplished so many great things. He's a lawyer practitioner with a big law firm in the Arab world and has done successfully well. I think in his senior year, he came to this institute here. That's got to be almost 40 years ago, Bruce, 40 years ago. And in the younger generation behind him is Yasser Tabbara, also a DePaul law graduate from Syria, who practiced law in Chicago and who decided to leave the practice of law about 3 years ago to join the Syrian resistance movement, and worked with Mr. Ghassan Hito here, who was Prime Minister of the Syrian government in exile, if I can use that term, to try to liberate their country of origin. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my other adoptive son and great friend, Judge Khalid Ahmed, who has been working with me for 20 years and who is now a judge of the Court of Appeals of Cairo. And next to him is Judge Adli Hussein, who is former president of the State Security Court in Egypt, who's worked with this institute for 30 years in doing training for judges in the Arab world. And there are many here who deserve a personal greetings. But I also want to thank Mark Ellis, the Executive Director of the International Bar Association, for co-sponsoring this event, and the Association Internationale de Droit Pénal, represented by its Vice President, Jean-François Tony, who is also Vice President of this institute, and also recognize and thank Don Ferens and the Planethood Foundation for its support. I'm delighted to see my good friend and old friend Hans Corell, who came to this institute maybe 35, 40 years ago, Hans? 31 years ago. He was a judge on the Court of Appeals in Stockholm at the time, and since then had a particularly brilliant career by going from there to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sweden and then becoming the Undersecretary General of the United Nations for Legal Affairs. So there are many of you in this room who have been associated with the Institute, who have been involved in various aspects of international criminal justice, and for whom this is a bit of a return to a home base. And I say that because I have always been of the belief that human relations are very important to not only bring people together, but to cement human relations among those who share the same values, who share the same principles, and who would like to accomplish the same goals. In a sense, I think many of us here share these same values and the same principles. We serve humankind. For those of us who believe, it is our belief that we serve God by serving humankind. And we serve humankind because it is an end in and of itself. And we do it not because we are going to achieve a certain goal. Ours is to try. We do not control outcomes. We do the best we can. We act in good conscience, with integrity, and we hope that the good Lord will bring things to a particular result. This is why we are gathered here at a historic time when the traditional values and principles of human rights and international criminal justice that have been established since the end of World War II may well have reached their historic peak, where we see the threats to national security and international security becoming more important to the preservation of the values of human life and human dignity, where we see groups of people, irrespective of what group they belong to, what ideology or religious belief, basically act in a way that puts them beyond the reach of the law, where we come to the realization that what we inhabit is merely a spaceship, the spaceship Earth. And in this spaceship Earth, the compartments that we had, which were established since 1648 in the Treaty of Westphalia, and which divided us and compartmentalized us in nations, these compartments no longer exist. In this age of globalization, there are just too many factors that impact upon all of us, irrespective of boundaries and irrespective of who we are. How are we going to face this future? How are we going to face a future in which security threats are going to be more important than human values? In which certain realities are going to be totally beyond our control? Realities that have to do with the world demographics, with environmental concerns. We are now at approximately 7.2 billion people, with approximately 800 million people at the level of hunger. In about 30 years, we are likely to be 9.2 billion people, with 1.3 billion people below the level of hunger. That will be essentially concentrated in Africa and Asia. Do we have anything in our international legal system that provides an obligation to assist. The obligation to protect, the duty to protect, has certainly not worked out. And if the responsibility to protect in cases of genocide and serious crimes against humanity is not heeded, will the international community heed the needs of communities who are going to be impacted by famine, by hunger, by disease, by ignorance? How many more states will we see that will become failed and failing states, maintaining violence at home and exporting violence abroad? How will the international community respond to it? How will the international community respond to the degradation of the environment and the impact of the environment, with sea levels increases, underground water levels decreasing, food production decreasing, the inability of feeding people or coming to the assistance of people, particularly in times of environmental disasters? How will we be able to control the impact on our environment of the increased environmental changes and so on? Is the world ready to look into a new international legal order? Are we still anchored in 1648? Are we still so concerned about the idea of the sovereignty and independence and equal sovereignty of all states to ignore what this means in terms of impact on human society and human groups? Will we see the world maybe go back to a medieval European model in which the rich and the powerful will inhabit the castles above the hills, will pull the moats at night, and leave the poor and the downtrodden down in the plains fending for themselves? What sort of a future do we see in the next 20 to 40 years, which is not that far away to predict, and that is likely to have a significant impact on human harm? Consider, if you will, a simple fact. 200,000 people have been killed in Syria, anywhere between 3 and 5 million refugees, and somehow it's accepted, it's digested. If I can use the word, it's metabolized. It's weighed against, is it worth militarily intervening? Well, how many lives must be taken before the international community realizing, yes, there is an impediment to us continuing in this course of conduct, and yes, we must change this course of conduct? What is the threshold anymore? A few years ago, in 2008, this institute undertook a study of world conflicts since World War II. We found out that between 1948 and 2008, there were 313 conflicts in the world, which resulted in 92 million people killed. At what point in time did the conscience of humankind awaken to say we should do something about it? Yes, we had a resurgence of international criminal justice concerns. The first modest step was the establishment of the Commission of Experts to investigate war crimes in the former Yugoslavia. And then came the establishment of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. And then came the establishment of an International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, whose prosecutor, Hassan Jallo, is here with us. Hans Corell will remember that period because he was legal advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, in which he drafted a proposed statute for the creation of a Yugoslavia tribunal based on an earlier model which I had done in connection with the enforcement of the Apartheid Convention. And of course, this had a very strong influence on the Security Council subsequent adoption of the statute. And from there, as Catherine Sikink, who is with us here, wrote this magnificent book, Justice Cascade, you will see the cascade of justice developing. And here I raise the question, 92 million people killed from 48 to 2008, 313 conflicts. The total number of persons prosecuted internationally over this period of time for that number of victims was 827 persons. And even if you wanted to imagine a model and say, how many people does it take to kill 92 million people? And if you have a model of, let's say, a Nazi model, you would say 3 to 4 million people? Or a Stalinist model, 3 to 4 million people? Assume that to be true. How is it possible that only 827 be prosecuted? And suddenly we have this great cascade of justice. And where is it leading to? As the distinguished prosecutor from Rwanda will tell you, it is leading to the end of the ICTY, the end of the ICTR, the winding down of their proceedings, the winding down of all of the special tribunals that have been established, the hybrid courts of Sierra Leone, of Cambodia and others. Within Lebanon, Judge Akoum is here from the Court of Lebanon. What will we have in a year's time? Will we have nothing of that cascade of justice? And if so, will the International Criminal Court be able to fill the gap? Will people not ask questions about the costs and look at maybe the average cost per defendant in the Yugoslavia and Rwanda tribunals is an average of $10 million? Is the international community going to be able to afford, if I can use the term, the luxury of such international criminal justice systems? Will it be able to afford to survive in light of, with all due respect to my good friends from the United Nations, the bureaucracy of the United Nations, which is so stifling and so difficult in order to overcome and to make more efficient the operations? Are national legal systems going to really rise to the challenge of complementarity, which the ICC statute urged us to do? What will happen with important functions such as those of commissions of inquiry? And we have with us here a dear friend, Bill Shabas, who has just been appointed as chair of the Commission of Inquiry for Gaza. And as someone who has chaired 5 of these commissions, I can only wish him well, and I hope he doesn't know half of what I know, so as not to be discouraged by what he will be facing, and that with his enthusiasm and sense of mission, he will be able to overcome all of the obstacles that will be in his way. But as many know, and in particular Mona Rishmawi, who was responsible for a meeting at the UN, I think a year ago, where there was an evaluation following a meeting we had in Syracuse on looking at the some 30 commissions of inquiry established by the UN and how different they are. Each commission has its own mandate. Each one functions in a separate way. Some of them are very efficient. Some of them are not efficient at all. Some of them go in the field for a long period of time. Some stay at Palais Wilson for all of the time. There's a total disparity, and there's a very great difference in terms of evaluating the outcomes. And still, we see certain gaps, particularly at the normative level, which are difficult to explain. One of which is the absence of a convention on crimes against humanity. When you think here, crimes against humanity were first expressed after World War I. And here we are, since 1919 until today, without a convention. Finally, thanks to the efforts of Sean Murphy here and a group of people at the International Law Commission, the International Law Commission has appointed him the rapporteur, and it is now officially on the agenda of the ILC to look into the elaboration of a convention on crimes against humanity. But think of how long it took, and we're not there yet. So that's at the normative level, where we're still trying to fill gaps in. Look at the gaps we have at the normative level with respect to conflicts of a non-international character and conflicts of a purely internal character. What are we going to do? All of the assumptions that we had of mutuality of interests between people who wear uniforms and fight in armies are no longer going to be there. They are no longer being there. You know, is ISIS ever concerned about rules of international humanitarian law? Do they ever know they exist? They have no idea of what the basic rules of the Sharia are, which are exactly contrary to everything that they're doing. But there we are. The question that we have is that there is an entire panoply of new global issues, of new global realities, and we are part of that universe of globalization, and yet our international legal order has not caught up with that reality. What do we need to do before we realize tomorrow that the gains we have made since World War II will be probably irrevocably lost? When states are unable to govern, as we're already seeing the crisis of governability in states, when states are going to look at national security and national interest as primary to anything else, as human interests and human values will recede in the priorities of states, what sort of humankind will we have, and what sort of world order will we have? And I think it's time for us to sort of raise the red flag. In French you would say sonner le tocsin, and hopefully get the world's attention to the new priorities that we must address. This is the purpose and goal of this meeting. It is to share our respective knowledges and concerns, and hopefully develop, if I can use the term, a small snowball, which will catch up as time goes up. A snowball that will alert those like-minded persons that it is necessary for us to start thinking, planning, and executing a new world order in order to face the new realities of globalization. So this is what we have in mind. It is a tall order. It is a challenging order, but we have quite a diverse audience, over 100 people from 32 countries, and hopefully we will be able to cast a little more light on some of these issues. So I thank you.